Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another election prediction. This time we have Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who has a pretty high approval rating up against former President Donald Trump. Now, Shapiro, I definitely think he's an S tier candidate for the Democrats. I think he would definitely give Trump a run for his money in an electoral college scenario. He just has such a high approval rating in Pennsylvania. I definitely think he'd do well with independent voters as well. But other than that, we continue setting up the safe states. And if you aren't subscribed already, I would highly recommend doing so. If you enjoy this type of content, that is. But I think we're almost done here setting up all the safe states. Okay, let's head right into this. So Colorado, it's a very progressive state. It's just getting more and more Democratic leaning every year. So Shapiro would easily take it. In the state of Maine, I also think it would be safe Democratic. I think Shapiro is the right type of candidate to lock in Maine's at-large electoral votes by a safe blue margin, but Maine second, it would probably still go to Trump, but only by a much more reduced margin. I think Shapiro could definitely do pretty well in the more rural, moderate district of Maine second than Joe Biden could at this point. Okay, what states we head to next? I would say New Mexico. I think you'd definitely turn out most Democrats here. I'd pretty much lock it down as a safe blue state. Same with Virginia. They're both traditionally blue states, but he would definitely outperform Joe Biden with independent voters here, just netting a bigger margins in the suburbs of each of these states. Okay. In the state of New Hampshire, I also think would probably lock up this state as a safe blue state. I think he's that good of a candidate. And this state is just it typically just has a hatred of Donald Trump. Trump usually polls pretty badly in this state, and it's just going to keep trending Democratic against Republicans because it's just a socially liberal state at this point. It really lost its swing state status at this point, unless we start seeing polls showing the opposite of that. I think if you have a really solid candidate in Josh Shapiro, most Democrats are pretty solid, would be able to win New Hampshire by a safe blue margin at this point. Okay, the next state. Iowa, I think you'd be able to drag it down to likely Republican, but still, most predictions have this as a safe Republican state, just over 10 points. But I think Shapiro's that good of a Democratic candidate, he'll be able to drag it down to the likely margin. Nebraska's second, I think Shapiro would be able to win by a likely blue margin. Nebraska's first, I could see him actually dragging it down to a likely Republican margin. I think he would do that well in the suburban areas of Nebraska's first district, that he'd be able to drag it down a bit. Okay, Ohio. Most polls, I really doubt Ohio could even be brought down to a lean Republican margin at this point. Even with a strong candidate in Josh Shapiro, the Republican trends here against the Democrats are just brutal. He'll definitely bring the margin down from 8 points to about 6 or 5. I would say about 5.5%. He would bring it down. But Trump would still win it by a likely Republican margin. That's kind of how far gone Ohio is for Democrats at this point. The state of Florida, even with Shapiro, he has a more Midwestern appeal. I really don't think he'd be able to even get Florida down to a lean Republican margin. But Texas, yeah, he'll definitely bring it down to lean Republican. I think he'd do well in the suburban and urban areas of Texas. And yeah, I think he would bring it down to like a 3-point Trump victory in the state of Texas. He'd just do better with independent voters than Biden here. Alaska, I also see getting dragged down to a likely Republican margin just with independent voters, and Shapiro appealing better than Joe Biden, who's honestly, I think Biden's age issue hurts him way more than Trump's age, even though they're relatively similar in age, just a few years difference. But I think with a younger Democratic candidate, you'd be able to win a lot more independent voters over, especially in a solid type of governor like Shapiro, who's quite popular with voters. Okay, let's see here. We'll save the Rust Belt for the end. All right, let's do Arizona and Nevada next. I think both these states, honestly, especially with Trump's messaging and abortion, it would definitely hurt him in Nevada against a really decent Democratic candidate. I really think he would win over a lot of moderate voters in Arizona. But Trump doesn't really need Nevada or Arizona to win. He just needs a few of the Rust Belt states and Georgia and North Carolina. Okay, North Carolina and Georgia. Should we do these two states or do the Rust Belt? I'm going to do the Rust Belt first. I'll save those two states for the end. Minnesota, I think we'd be able to pretty much lock in this state as a high single digits victory, probably in the 8.5% range. I think it would appeal very well in most of the Rust Belt. And even in Michigan, I think to be able to lock in this state is likely Democratic as well. I just think he would win over a lot of Midwestern voters. He performed extremely well in Pennsylvania last time, but Republicans going to give up on that race at some point. But I still think even if they put funds into Mastriano's campaign, he still would have lost by a pretty big margin in Pennsylvania. And again, moving on to Pennsylvania, Shapiro's home state, he has a very high approval rating here, while Donald Trump has a very low favorability rating in Pennsylvania. It's pretty much very similar to Biden's favorability rating in the state as well. So, again, with Donald Trump's low favorabilities and Shapiro's very high favorabilities in Pennsylvania, it'd be two likely Democratic states. So, honestly, Trump's path would probably be, instead of trying to win in Pennsylvania, Michigan, probably need to have Wisconsin and maybe flip Arizona and Nevada. That's probably the path, honestly. But again, if he's losing Pennsylvania and Michigan by likely blue margins, he's probably losing Wisconsin as well. But Wisconsin would be the more closer state. Again, Trump's populist message would pretty much resonate here quite effectively. But then again, I think Shapiro would just get a lot of Midwestern appeal. He would do pretty well with populist voters in his own right, definitely do well with union voters. I see Shapiro probably winning the state of Wisconsin by about 2 points against Donald Trump, maybe even 3. But North Carolina and Georgia. I'd probably have Georgia going as lean blue. I see Shapiro still doing well with black turnout overall, just doing better with independent voters than Biden. In North Carolina, yeah, I think he's that solid of a candidate that maybe he would be able to eke out a narrow win in North Carolina against Trump. So I have this as a 319 to 219 map. The only state that changes from 2020 is North Carolina flipping blue. But this scenario is quite unlikely. It only happens if Biden drops out of the primary, then I could see Shapiro running. But then again, I could also see him just letting another governor run because he's still early on in his term as Pennsylvania governor. I think it might be too early for him to run the 2024 election. Not for 2028, however. I think he should definitely consider running then. I think that'd be a pretty good time to run because he would already have served a term in Pennsylvania. He'd probably run for re-election in 2026 and probably win a second term. So again, he probably should wait for 2020 and let someone else win or run in 2024. So this is the map. I think Shapiro would probably win the popular vote against Trump by 5. I just think he's that strong of a candidate. But that's all. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments below. I'd highly recommend subscribing to the channel. And I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.